This content is for informational purposes only and does not replace professional medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for personal health concerns. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you simply refused to close your eyes for 3 full days? Most of us view a single missed night of rest as an inconvenience, a brief period of grogginess we can shake off with a strong cup of coffee. It is a state that pushes the biological boundaries of the human organism, moving far beyond mere tiredness into a realm where your brain begins to struggle with the basic task of interpreting reality. Sleep is not merely a passive state of downtime, it is a complex, active biological necessity that keeps our internal systems synchronized. When you strip that away for 3 days, you are essentially depriving your cells of their designated maintenance cycle. Research suggests that after this duration, your cognitive performance drops to levels comparable to legal alcohol intoxication. You might find that your focus fractures, your memory becomes unreliable, and your emotional regulation begins to fray at the edges. While some individuals might believe they can power through extreme exhaustion, evidence shows that the physiological cost is far higher than most people realize. We are going to examine the progression of this deprivation, looking at how your systems react when the clock keeps ticking and the lights stay on. We will look at the neurological shifts, the hormonal imbalances, and the physical toll that accumulates when you ignore the body's loudest signal for recovery. This journey through the science of sleep loss is meant to shed light on why your nightly rest is the most powerful tool you have for longevity and mental clarity. By understanding the consequences of such extreme sleep debt, we can better appreciate the intricate mechanisms that keep us grounded, sharp, and healthy. Let's pull back the curtain on the mechanics of wakefulness and what happens when those systems are pushed to their absolute breaking point. To understand why 72 hours of wakefulness is a physiological cliff, we must first recognize that sleep is not merely a passive state of rest. During these hours, your brain is busy clearing out metabolic waste, specifically proteins like amyloid beta that accumulate during your waking hours. By the time you hit the 3-day mark, the toll on your internal systems becomes profound. Research suggests that by this stage, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for complex decision-making, emotional regulation, and focus, begins to struggle significantly. Studies indicate that sustained wakefulness triggers a systemic stress response, spiking your cortisol levels and putting your cardiovascular system under immense pressure. It is as if your body is desperately trying to compensate for the lack of downtime by flooding your system with adrenaline, yet the physical machinery is simply too exhausted to keep pace. As you push towards 72 hours, the boundary between reality and hallucination starts to blur. These are brief, involuntary lapses into sleep that last only a few seconds. You may find yourself staring at a wall or a screen, completely unaware that your consciousness has drifted elsewhere. Furthermore, your immune system begins to show signs of suppression. Without that recovery period, your body's ability to defend itself is compromised, leaving you more vulnerable than you would be under normal conditions. The cumulative effect is a total collapse of cognitive and physical efficiency. It is important to note that every individual's threshold for this exhaustion varies, but the overarching patterns remain consistent across scientific observation. While these physiological shifts are alarming, they are merely the beginning of the body's desperate attempts to protect itself from total system failure. Let's look at the onset of cognitive distortion and how the brain attempts to interpret a world it no longer fully understands. As we peel back the layers of that cognitive unraveling, you might find yourself wondering how anyone reaches this state of exhaustion in the first place. When we look at the drivers of prolonged wakefulness, we see a complex intersection of professional necessity, unforeseen medical burdens, and the relentless pace of modern life. Consider the high-stress occupations that demand absolute vigilance. In these fields, the pressure to perform often eclipses the body's innate need for rest. They operate in a state of chronic alertness where the brain is conditioned to prioritize external demands over internal recovery. While training programs have shifted to mitigate these risks, the reality remains that many professionals find themselves pushing into that critical 72-hour window simply to fulfill their duties. For those suffering from severe insomnia or certain neurological disorders, sleep is not a guaranteed refuge, it becomes an elusive target. Studies indicate that for individuals struggling with delayed sleep phase syndrome or intense anxiety-induced hyperarousal, the inability to disconnect is a physiological trap. In these instances, the lack of sleep is not a lifestyle choice, but a distressing symptom of a system that refuses to power down. Many people find their internal clocks disrupted by the constant connectivity of the modern world. The blue light from screens and the psychological pull of endless notifications can trick the brain into thinking it is still daytime, effectively suppressing the release of melatonin. It is a subtle erosion of our natural rhythms, leading many to inadvertently drift into these dangerous periods of prolonged wakefulness without ever intending to do so. Understanding these drivers is essential because it shifts the conversation from personal failing to a broader systemic issue. By recognizing these triggers, we can better appreciate why the body eventually reaches a breaking point. As the biological cost of this deprivation continues to mount, the body begins to signal that it can no longer sustain this pace, leading us toward the most critical phase of this entire ordeal. At the 72-hour mark, your internal architecture begins to fray in ways that defy normal human experience. You may encounter complex visual or auditory hallucinations, shadows taking on human shapes or voices whispering from empty corners of the room. Your cognition is effectively offline. Simple tasks like reading a sentence or calculating a basic sum become insurmountable hurdles. You will find yourself trapped in loops of thought, unable to finish a sentence or recall why you walked into a room. You might be standing or sitting, yet your brain abruptly shuts down, leaving you momentarily paralyzed and unaware of your surroundings. These lapses are the mind's final, frantic attempt to seize a fraction of the restoration it requires to survive. Without the deep cycle repair that occurs during sleep, your immune system enters a state of suppression. You are essentially leaving your gates wide open to pathogens, making you hypervulnerable to illness. Your heart rate becomes erratic, blood pressure fluctuates wildly, and your body's ability to regulate glucose is severely compromised. You are not just tired, you are operating in a state of physiological emergency. The loss of cognitive clarity, the onset of sensory disturbances, and the systematic weakening of your biological defenses prove that rest is not a luxury, it is the very foundation of your existence. Sleep is the quiet architect of your health, repairing your tissues, consolidating your memories, and fortifying your immunity against a world of threats. This content is for informational purposes only. If you found this information helpful, consider subscribing to the channel for more insights into the science of your well-being.